We're nearing the end of this first part of our message series called Rooted Inward, and we've been talking about the basic and essential truths of Christianity, the basic beliefs, so that we can become more firmly grounded or rooted in our faith in Jesus Christ. I hope this has been a good series for you. Knowing what we believe and how that takes root in our lives is very important, because what we believe will determine how we'll behave. And so it's important. We'll start in a few weeks, the week after Easter, we'll start our next series called Rooted Upward, and we'll talk about how do we really start to flesh this out in our lives and our hearts. But right now we're just kind of addressing the mind. And this morning we're going to talk about compassion, and I'll just be right up front, frank with you. I am preaching this sermon to me as much as I am to you this morning. Most of my sermons are like that. Anytime I get up and preach, they are directed to me as much as you. Maybe more to me this morning than most. Compassion is one of those areas that I've got to work diligently at. And so I just want you to know this is one of those ones, it hits me pretty deeply this morning. So I'll start out this way. Stephen Covey tells the story in his book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, about a time he got on the New York subway system, and he entered the train and sat down, and the subway train was pretty quiet until a man and his 2 boys entered the car. The man went and sat down, kind of closed his eyes, kind of was oblivious to his 2 children who were now running around the train, creating havoc, being noisy, annoying everybody who's sitting on the train. But the children's dad seemed oblivious to what was going on. So Covey's watching all this go down, and finally he gets up the nerve, he confronts the man about his children, and he says to him, "You probably ought to do something about your children." To which the man, he opened his eyes, he evaluated the situation, and he told Stephen Covey, "Oh, I guess you're right. I guess I should do something about it. You see, we just came from the hospital where their mother died about an hour ago. And I don't know what to think. And I guess they don't know how to handle it either." And just like your reaction just now, right? In just that moment, in an instant, Stephen Covey said his entire perspective shifted, and his heart was filled with this man's pain. And that's compassion, right? Compassion begins with understanding, and when we begin to see someone's pain, our perspective shifts, it changes, and we begin to feel for that person. Natalie read from Luke chapter 10 a little bit ago, and we read about Jesus' interaction with one of the religious elite. Very important in society. He was an expert in the law. And this guy, he says, "I just want to know, who can I let into my neighborhood? Who is it that I should let in? Who should I let be my neighbor?" He's a lawyer in all things religious. He has studied the Old Testament law, and he's trying to figure out, how can I best flesh this out in my life? Just how can I do this? Because I want to follow the letter of the law, and I want to be able to instruct others how to do the same thing. And so it's as if he's saying to Jesus, let's get down to the nitty-gritty here. And there are certain people that I know how to love. But then there are other people that I don't necessarily have to love, do I? So just give me the answer, Jesus, so that I can apply it to my life, and then I can instruct others to do the same. You see, most Jewish people in Jesus' day, they viewed only other Jewish people as their neighbors. That's it. They didn't go outside of that. And so some of the Jewish people, the Pharisees, if you will, the religious leaders of the day, they went a step further, and they viewed only the esteemed Jewish people as their neighbors. And so if they were young, influential, if they were wealthy, then the Pharisees would let those kinds of people into their neighborhood. And I wonder, maybe we do the same kind of thing today. Do we evaluate people and say, yeah, it's easy to love that person, but not that person? Maybe we tend to value certain people differently. We love the CEO of the corporation. We love the wealthy. We love the affluent. We love people that are easy to love. Maybe we love the churchgoers, I hope. We love the religious, like we get along with these people, and it's easy to love these kinds of people, but do I really have to love the homeless? Do I really have to love the social outcast, the drunk, the mean neighbor across the street? Do I really have to love those people? There are certain people I know how to love, but then there are other people that maybe I don't have to love. It's okay not to love. Just tell me the answer, Jesus. So Jesus tells this story of the Good Samaritan, right? Helping this man who gets beaten up and left for dead at the side of the road. And I think Jesus tells this story to open the blind eyes of the religious leader. And I think maybe to open our eyes as well. And so the idea of having compassion, Jesus uses this word compassion. I want you to remember that word for a moment. And the idea of having compassion is, it's easy to admire, like, yes, that is what I want. I want to be a compassionate person. But man, it sure is difficult to practice, isn't it? Anybody with me? It's tough. Like, it's easy to agree with compassion and having compassion in theory, but it's difficult when I'm talking to me here. It's easy to have compassion, or to want to have compassion in theory, but it's difficult when it interrupts our schedule, when it costs us something, when it shows up in the life of someone we'd rather avoid. Compassion is difficult. And so what I want to ask is, what does biblical compassion look like? What does it look like, really? And again, man, I got 4 things to give you, but man, I'm giving these to me this morning. In the story of the Good Samaritan, we see 4 characteristics of compassion. If you're taking notes, here's the first one. Biblical compassion sees need and not worth. It sees need and not worth. In the story, Jesus introduces 2 characters that we would be sure would help this man who's been beaten up and left for dead by the side of the road. A priest and a Levite, right? They should have helped him. But first, this priest comes walking by, and he sees the man. But what does he do? He goes out of his way to avoid the man, right? Why? Maybe one, he doesn't know if the man is alive or dead. If the man is dead, then certainly the priest would not want to go over and help the man, because as soon as the priest touches a dead body, he becomes unclean. He becomes defiled. And therefore, he would not be allowed to go down to the temple and do his job. Okay, so maybe that's it. Why take the risk? Whether he's dead or not, I don't know. I'm not going to risk it. Secondly, what if the priest, in trying to help the man, also becomes a victim of robbers and gets beaten up and left for dead? We can't have that happening. He's a priest. Like, my people need me. It's better to keep on going and walk past this man than to wind up dead by the side of the road. Or what if this man, this priest, helped this guy, and I know this is going to sound funny, but I think it's true, right? What if this priest, in helping this man, got his robe dirty? What an inconvenience. And you have to understand, back then, and maybe even today, the priests were looked at as you can't get dirty. We don't want our priest looking like a bum. And so appearance is everything. And maybe we're the same today, aren't we? Like, appearance is everything. I don't want to get dirty. I don't want to get my hands dirty and trying to help somebody. Maybe somebody else will help. So the priest keeps walking on by. Then a Levite comes walking by. Now, a Levite is a temple assistant, so he's like the priest's right-hand man. Now, I don't know. I thought of this earlier this week. What if this guy was the assistant to the priest that just walked by? He just saw this guy walk by, so he's got to catch up. Maybe he's late for work. I don't know. But he walks on by. He's in the same predicament as the priest. Can't touch a dead body, doesn't want to get dirty, whatever that looks like, too much time. He's got to get to work, whatever that looks like, right? So he walks on by. He keeps going. 2 really good Jewish people passed by their fellow Jew, a man they would consider to be a decent neighbor, if you will. By any religious expert, they would say these are decent neighbors, but they pass on by for whatever reason. Maybe in their eyes, this man's not worthy of compassion. He's not worthy of compassion. And so both of these guys, they saw the man, but somewhere between seeing him and helping him, they evaluated him. They evaluated his worth and said, not worth my time, and left him for dead. In 2011, baseball fan Brian Stowe attended opening day at Dodger Stadium. After the game, an argument escalated into this brutal attack that left Brian permanently disabled. Here's what's wild. The assault took place in full view of thousands of people in a stadium that was patrolled by 442 police and security officers. When the league officials reviewed the situation, they determined that the major contribution to this man getting so beat up that it left him paralyzed for the rest of his life, left him disabled for the rest of his life, was this, quote, a culture of apathy and indifference. People saw what was happening, but nobody stepped in to help. Maybe we've been there. Why show compassion to someone who blew all his money on alcohol and cigarettes, right? Why show compassion to someone who made poor choices and now struggles to make ends meet? Why show compassion to someone who gambled all his money away? Why show compassion to this man lying on the side of the road taking his last breaths? Maybe he deserved what he got. So why should I care? Why should I make it my problem? Why should I get involved? Man, compassion is based on need. That's why, not worth. Number 2, biblical compassion is emotional and not logical. It's emotional and not logical. In verse 33, we read, when the Samaritan saw the man, he had compassion. This is a strong word in the original language, in the Greek language, compassion. When the Samaritan saw this beaten up man, his heart went out to him. But deeper than that, something in his gut, this is what this word compassion means, something in his gut, not his brain, not even his heart, but in his gut told him, you've got to do something about this. Something in his gut felt for and with the man lying on the side of the road. But hold on a second. Jews, we know Jewish people don't like Samaritan people. These are the people who intermarried with the Babylonians. Jews would call them half-breeds, if you will. And so the Jews, they didn't have anything to do with Samaritans. They avoided Samaritans. They avoided everything from Samaria. Not going to happen. They were enemies. And so as Jesus is telling this story, people in the crowd listening to this would think, instead of this man going over to help the Jewish man lying on the side of the road, he's going to go over there and finish him off because they're enemies. But instead he has compassion. The word compassion means to suffer with. And so instead of seeing the beaten up man as the enemy, the Samaritan feels for him and with him. He not only imagines the pain and suffering this guy must be going through, but he also feels his pain and suffering deep within his gut. He feels for and with the man deep inside. I think it's important for us to understand, that God is not necessarily calling us to fix everybody's problems. But I think he does call us to come alongside and enter into their suffering with them. With them. Compassion is more than just throwing time or money at a problem. It's feeling with the people who are suffering. When I go to visit people in the hospital, one of the questions I usually ask is, hey, is there anything I can do for you? And usually they'll say something like, no, that's okay, I'm good, or, you can pray for me. But they typically say, I'm just glad you're here. I'm just glad you're here. Why is that? Because people who are suffering don't always need answers. They just need presence, our being there. They need us to be there. When we're suffering, most times we just want someone to understand what we're going through. Right? We just want people to go, oh man, I get it, I've been there, right? Or man, it must be really tough for you. We don't have to have all the answers, but we can have this stirring in our gut. We can have this stirring going on so we can feel forward, we can feel with the persecuted Christians around the world. We can feel with and for Alzheimer victims, the hungry, the poor, the sick, the abused, the homeless, or the person lying in a hospital bed. We can feel for with them. So compassion is emotional, not logical. A lot of times it doesn't make sense, right? It's emotional. Number 3, biblical compassion leads to then action. It leads us to action. Verse 34 says, the Samaritan went over to the guy, bandaged his wounds, poured on olive oil and wine, and then he put him on his own animal, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. Compassion doesn't just stay in our hearts. Man, it moves our feet. It moves us to action. There was a Washington Post article about an Army major, pretty high up in ranking, right? An Army major, his name is Odie Butler. He was on his way to work one morning at the Pentagon, and he came upon a serious accident on the Interstate 395. This was during rush hour. During rush hour, a man was driving down the road, lost control of his truck, crashed, and was thrown from his vehicle, landing right near the highway where hundreds of vehicles were passing by every minute, right? He landed by the interstate and critically injured. He could not get up. He could not help himself. Hundreds of cars driving past. No one stopped. Some even honked their horns and yelled at the man. But finally, out of hundreds of drivers, this Army major stopped to help. Most people saw the need, but they just kept on driving. Sympathy might feel bad for a person, but compassion crosses the road. We may not be able to help everyone everywhere, but man, we can help someone somewhere. We can take action and do something. Let me give you the last one, number 4. Biblical compassion gives without demanding return. It gives without demanding return. In other words, compassion is always going to cost us something, right? Compassion cost the Samaritan 2 days' wages. It cost him some time, some energy. He had to sacrifice, come back and check on the man later on. Most acts of compassion never make the headlines. Very rarely do they do, right? There's no applause. There's no recognition. There's no repayment. Just quiet mercy, quiet compassion. There's a story about two classmates named Mark and Bill. Mark and Bill were in elementary school at this time. They were walking home from school one day, not together, but separate. Mark looked ahead, and saw Bill stumble to the ground and drop everything he was carrying. So Mark hurried to Bill's side. He helped him collect all his belongings and get him back to his feet. And surprisingly, Bill was carrying an especially hefty load that day. He had a baseball glove, a bat, a couple of sweaters. I laughed about this in first service. A small tape recorder. Some of you are like, what's a tape recorder? Maybe a cell phone, an iPhone. An armful of books. He had a lot of stuff. And so Mark, he got to his side. He helped Bill carry all this stuff home, and Bill appreciated Mark's compassion. During the walk home, Mark discovered that Bill was struggling in school. He had just broken up with his girlfriend. And when they got to Bill's house, Bill invited Mark inside for a Coke, and they spent the afternoon together laughing and telling stories, watching TV, and just developed a friendship there. The boys never really became close throughout junior high and high school, but they would check in with each other once in a while. They're kind of like associates, right? Kind of just checking in with each other throughout junior high and high school. And then leading up to graduation, a few weeks before graduation from high school, Bill approached Mark and he asked him if he had remembered the day they had met when Mark helped him with all his stuff. And Mark nodded as he remembered that day. Yeah, I remember that. Bill then asked, do you ever wonder why I was carrying so much stuff? Without pausing for an answer, Bill explained that he had cleaned out his locker and was going home to commit suicide. He had been storing away sleeping pills, and he was headed home to end it all when Mark happened to come along and help him out. Bill told Mark that simple act of compassion that day inspired him to keep on living. He said, Mark, when you picked up my books that day, you saved my life. Mark had no idea what that moment meant. He simply took the time to help. Man. I wonder, how many times have I passed by somebody because I didn't want to get my robe dirty. I didn't have the time. I lacked the compassion to be there for somebody. And I know I've done it. And if anyone had a busy schedule, if anyone had very limited time, if anyone could say, I don't want to get my robe dirty, It was Jesus. Jesus had all kinds of reasons not to get involved. The crowds were constant, the needs were endless, the demands were relentless, but Matthew 9:36 tells us this. This is your memory verse if you want to do this week. When Jesus saw the crowds, he felt what? Compassion. Same word from the story he told. He felt compassion for them. He noticed them. He not just noticed them, he paid attention to them. He felt for them from deep within his gut, and he decided to do something about them. He crossed the road for them. You know, the story of the Good Samaritan, it's the story of the gospel, right? This is the story of Jesus. Sin had beaten us and left us, if you will, half dead on the side of the road. But Jesus, when he came along, he didn't walk past us. Oh, no. No, he crossed the road. Jesus crossed the chasm of eternity, and he bound our wounds. And the cost wasn't just 2 days' wages, man. The cost was the cross. If we've truly put our roots down into that kind of mercy, Jesus kind of mercy, compassion then won't be a program. It won't be forced. It'll become this natural reflex. That's what I pray I get. Jesus looked at the religious expert and he said, go and do the same. Go and do the same. In other words, Jeremy Klein, you go and live like someone whose roots are deep, deeply rooted in mercy and compassion. That's what God calls us to today.